Oh, goodness gracious, I need to pay attention. It's almost time.
Oh, no,
Past
yeah.
time.
I
No,
think
it's
that's the,
4:59.
Well, our electronic meter isn't on.
gotta look at the corner of the screen. The screen, this screen.
It says 4:59.
Yeah, look at your computer screen now. That's the one we're going by.
You thought it was an etch a
Gee,
sketch.
this is a lot like the one I have at home.
So they're shaking and trying to reset
Recording
it.
is now in progress.
Oh, yes. Of what?
Did you?
No,
Bob didn't get one. Yeah.
Welcome, everyone, to the regular town council meeting, town of Cave Creek, Arizona, Monday, November 15th, 2021. Teresa, the roll, please.
Councilmember Royer,
Here.
Councilmember Morris,
present.
Councilmember McGuire,
Present.
Vice Mayor Smith,
Here.
Councilmember Diefendorfer,
Here.
Councilmember Sova,
Here.
Mayor Bunch.
I don't know if I'm present or here. Here.
It's always good to have present.
All right. An executive session will be held for the purpose of discussion, consultation, provide instruction to the town attorney and town manager regarding financing alternatives and impact on contract terms, depending on financing alternatives in connection with the provision of fire protection services, and 2, terms of agreement and to enter into with Daisy Mountain pursuant to Arizona Revised Statute, section 38-431.03A.3 and A.4. Do we have a motion to move into e-session?
Mr. Mayor, before we make that motion,
Oh.
I could add a clarifying point. This is an agenda item that we've used throughout, but we've told your constituents that from after the last council meeting going forward, we would have any financial discussion in public. The purpose for this e-session, even though it is one of the options, we will not be discussing financial ramifications. We'll simply be discussing the terms of the IGA so you can give us guidance.
Contractual agreement in
Yes,
the
sir.
IGA.
No
Yeah,
financing.
right.
And
Okay.
secondly, Michelle is here. You also have the water policy and ordinance. Technically, we have the power to discuss that in a session if you want to have any questions on that, to have her come in.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So
Okay. Now do we have a motion to move into e-session?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. We shall adjourn next door. Or go next door, whatever we do. Single.
It's the same one that Bill emailed.
Okay.
Or go next door, whatever we do. Single.
It's the same one that Bill.
Arizona, Monday, November 15th, 2021. Mr. Arlen, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public announcements. I got one for you tonight at midnight. It's the deadline for people to submit new nominations to be considered for this year's selection of Cave Creek Local Landmark Awards to nominate an iconic destination in town. In town core for the distinction. Please email local landmarks at cavecreekaz.gov. Next round of selections will be chosen at a regular council meeting in December and announced again in January. And that's all I've got. So we're now at call to the public.
Does Karen have any?
No, she's after call to the public. We have none. Oh, Mr. Arlen, why don't you step up here and tell us about your stargazing on last Sunday night
Well, sir.
or Sunday night 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it just occurred to me when you call to the public that I should stand up and say thanks a lot, everybody, for providing the Porta-Johns and the support from Kelly Francis. She was fabulous. And it was a great show. It was the first stargazing party event under clouds. It was quite something. And they opened up, and we had a great show. We had a ton of people, huge response. The town came together, people came together. I mean, it really was, and you see some photographs, some of it's going to be posted, I think, on the town website, and we have some stuff on Facebook, but thanks. It was great.
Glad to hear it.
Thanks.
Bruce.
Thanks for putting it on.
That's it. Town manager report.
Mayor, members of council, and the public, I'd like to introduce Teresa Riza as our new town clerk. She comes to us from the city of Phoenix City Clerk Department, where she served for 5 years. Teresa was formerly employed with the town of Cave Creek for I don't know how many years, several years, but she left and moved on and grew in her knowledge and experience. So she left the town about 8 years ago, and she's back with us. We're thrilled to have her, and I hope you all give her a good welcome.
Welcome, Teresa. We need you.
Welcome back.
I did want to announce that Hidden in the Hills is coming up this weekend and the following weekend, November 19, 20, 21, and November 26, 27, 28, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We are urging all of the community to shop local at our businesses, our galleries, and out at Hidden in the Hills, and choose local if you can. And then last but not least, we are having a special session next Monday, November 22nd, at our normal council meeting time at 6 p.m., where Rounds Consulting Group will go over the final report that he is producing based on the scope of services approved by council. That document, I spoke with him today, and I confirmed with him that we will have that later this week in writing so that it will be provided to the public and to the council members no later than Thursday at noon, so that you will have the entire weekend to review that and come prepared on Monday for any questions or concerns. The public will be allowed to speak. Mr. Rounds will be here to give a presentation, an overview of the report, and a highlight of how they came up with the information, so that council can ask questions and the public can also be engaged. And there is no action taken. There's nothing scheduled for you to vote on at that meeting. It's simply a presentation, discussion, questions, etc. And should you need some council determination on a direction, we can do that at the upcoming December 6th regular council meeting. Okay? Could I ask a question?
Yes. Will there be public comment available at that meeting?
Yes, I said the public input is welcome. Council can ask questions. They can ask questions, and they'll be happy to answer any questions or explain, the process they went through and the information that they have.
Okay, very good. I'm a little concerned that we need to get the word out. We only have a week. It's a week from tonight, and so we want to make sure that as many people as possible know about this speaker, because we've done our due diligence in finding him. He's an expert in his field. I think he's done a wonderful job so far, and based on comments from our public, at his October 15th presentation is why we're bringing him back. So we've invested a lot, both in time and energy and money, in having him here. So we need to do the last step of the process, which is to publicize his presentation on next Monday.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Pardon?
That's all I have.
I can see your mouth moving, but I can just barely hear you. It's all you have. I did see that. See, I can read lips. Here we go. Non-action item, presentation by the Utilities Director and discussion regarding revised water policy and a proposed ordinance 2021-08, amending the Town of Cave Creek Town Code, Title 5, Public Works, Chapter 52, Water, Section 52.001, definitions 52.108, extensions and subdivisions, and 52.202, buildings to have separate service connections, 52.204, application for new service connections, generally, 52-404, activation of water service, 52-405, reactivation or transfer of water service, and 52.411, discontinuance of service on order of customer. Plopped that down in front of me, Sean, and distracted me while I was reading.
I tried to be subtle, Sergeant. Well, let me first explain what I did hand out to the council. We realized that the amendment that is in the packet, it shows the revisions as blue and light blue. So originally it's supposed to be red and blue. So I handed out a copy, so it might be a little bit easier to follow with the red and blue. And if we want, we can pull it up. Brian has the Word document, so for the general public, they can see that also. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So what we're proposing tonight is to present on the water policy draft. We were last back with Council on September 20th to discuss this revision to town water policy. The water policy was adopted in 2017 as an attempt to, and a good attempt to actually preserve the town's water resources. So since that time, in the preceding 5 years, we've had some ideas to move forward with some changes that we think could be better implement and help us preserve the town's water resources, as well as make the policy a little more easily administered as a staff level. So unlike the previous policy, there's actually only a couple of code revisions. We're sort of reversing that, where the policy now is this more simplified document, and we're really proposing doing changes to town code, and that's what you're seeing tonight. So we want to get council's feedback on that. If that's the direction, then what we'll do is we'll bring that back to council. We actually have to do the 2 public hearings. So tonight it's not a public hearing, it's information only. After those 2 public hearings, and I believe there's a 30-day waiting period, and then the code changes would go into effect. During the last reading, we would actually also propose that we ask council to adopt the water policy itself. The water policy is a document that really changes how we deal with new water services out in Desert Hills. So with that, I can go through a few of the major changes, and then since it is so voluminous, I guess we can just go through and walk through the changes, and I can answer any questions as we come up. I'm not sure if you want a page-by-page revision or just a generalized. So you want me to just continue? Mm-hmm. I know it's fairly substantial changes we're proposing.
Okay.
No, so you have a preference for page by page.
No, I'm not going to statement it. Got a question.
Well, let's let him go ahead and do the presentation first.
One of the major changes that are being proposed is actually to add a volumetric calculation. In 2017, it was decided that the best way to handle it was to do it on a water meter size. And it basically says up to a 1-inch water meter can be provided to any parcel. The challenge with that is that a 1-inch water meter can move a lot of water, 50 gallons a minute. So in total, that's a lot of water over a year. So if someone was smart, they could actually do a small holding tank on their side, put a 1-inch meter in, and they can take a lot of water. So in order to preserve the town's water resources, we've put a volumetric limit on. We've changed that, or we've added into the code a change for both either commercial or single-family residential of half an acre foot. And we've also put in a calculation based on what we think is appropriate for multifamily, a smaller type of dwelling unit. So we have some volumetric limits that now we can work on. Some of the other changes, and I can go through more details, is some things that give us some latitude. One of the challenges we've had with commercial is that because of the limiting into 1 water meter, typically a commercial development would like to have 2 water meters, one for their indoor water use, which they get charged sewer on, and one for their outdoor landscaping. So this code allows us to do that as long as they stay within the total volumetric limit. A few other minor amendments are a big one is, again, the biggest change is actually in Desert Hills. So the town, since purchasing the Desert Hills water system, has been supplementing that system with the town's CAP allocation. Just recently, we've come to council and asked to help you, or asked to put a new subcontract for a non-Indian agricultural NIA CAP water that would be dedicated for Desert Hills. But it's not enough. It doesn't allow us to get a full total renewable water supply for Desert Hills. So In order to continue to preserve the water resources for the existing customers in Desert Hills, we're asking that with the policy, we basically are going to say that we'll only honor existing contracts that are in place, and a will serve is not a contract. So that's a substantial change from the previous policy, where we looked at will serves as more of a contractual obligation. We were tracking them as such. We have about 107 active will serves in Desert Hills. There's a few outstanding contracts, so this will drastically limit the new connections out in Desert Hills. And again, since we've taken it on, and since I've been on board with the town just over 2.5 years, the well production has decreased out in Desert Hills. We actually presented a report previously to council that showed that groundwater is not the solution for Desert Hills. It really needs to have a renewable water supply. But again, when the CAP, non-Indian agricultural water allocation, came through, while the town had originally asked for a lot more, back in 2013 we made the application, we didn't get as much as we needed even to meet the current obligations that we have to Desert Hills, which is over 600 acre feet a year of the 800 acre feet in that system demand. So with that, I will go through the changes unless Councilmember Vice Mayor Smith would like to answer
Vice
a question,
Mayor?
or anybody.
You already answered this to a degree. The manifold meter at the very beginning, where it's a definition of it, one installation of more than one meter onto a single water service. Does that mean that each of those, including the original one and then the family, are individually billed, or is only one of them billed?
The way the reason that got put in is a little broad explanation is current code requires that every meter have its own connection back to the service main and every meter have its own account. Where this came from is the idea it's downstream on the customer side that the customer could then ask for, say, two, if they have the demand for, say, a 1-inch meter, but instead they ask for 2 3/4-inch meters, assuming that the base rate will be less and that they can use less volume, they'd manifold those together. Code does allow us to have a single water meter if there's common ownership on the properties and common ownership of buildings. So you can do that. So we're not requiring people to do sub-metering. They can still elect to do that. What this code revision is attempting to do is prevent someone from asking for more meters in order for them to divide their volumetric calculation. So instead of maybe going into the highest water tier usage, they can spread it out over multiple meters. And that's the intent of this.
So the ancillary meters are not ours. We don't care about them.
Yeah, no, we don't. And that is, I'm actually trying to think of any locations where we actually have that. We've talked to several people about trying to do that, to sub-meter downstream of the town's meter. But again, our meter has to be located in a public right-of-way or a utility easement that we have access to maintain it. It's our apparatus that we manage, and that's what meters for the services. If they so choose to go downstream and sub-meter, actually, I know of one residential property that actually they're sub-metering their different usages. But typically, yeah, we don't have anybody. It's not a significant issue. This is the intent to say that we don't want you to ask for a second meter, knowing that you're trying to divide your volumetric calculation so that you're not going into the higher tier rates. So we actually had someone propose that to us, and the intended change is to stop that, saying, no, that's not the intent of code. We don't want you to spread your load among multiple meters to try and keep your bill lower, even though you're using a large volume of water for the property.
Okay, thank you.
So,
But follow-up question on that, which I have here when we get to section 52.202. Isn't it our advantage our conservation advantage not to have, for example, there you have an apartment building with 25 apartments and they have 1 meter in there. I mean, the building's going to be high because the total usage is going to be in those upper tiers. Mm-hmm. But you don't have the conservation ethic because no single residential owner will see the results of using too much water. And from the town's conservation standpoint, to conserve water, I would think that having multiple meters for multiple uses, not just manifolding, where it's one use, they just put it through 3 or 4 meters and it comes back together again, but where you have 4 different uses or however many different uses, that it's to everybody's advantage to conserve water so that they're water wise and they don't waste water.
I'd agree totally that if you can subdivide and sub-meter, that's a good thing. And if they can do it on our sides where they're individual meters, the problem we're trying to avoid is someone then sub-metering for the intents purely of trying to reduce their volumetric calculation on their water bills. That's
Well,
what the
I mean,
manifold
we could even say you could
Yeah.
have 1 meter, but then you have to sub-meter or something, but, because I think fairness comes into this. Water and water conservation are the two abiding issues, what I see in this whole document. The conservation, we've got to get serious about conservation.
Yeah.
As I paid my $131 water bill last month that I used to use $100 worth.
Good water, though, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, again, if a multifamily residential unit came in, I do agree that it's really nice to be able to. They can still submeter. There's nothing preventing them from submetering. This goes back to how the town bills and us seeing what someone had proposed. They never did it, but an attempt to go around when we did the rate increase last year. Because they were a high volume user, they actually tried to do a calculation to try and show that actually if they paid even the base rate on smaller multiple meters, it actually worked out in their benefit. And this is the attempt to say, that's not what we have rate tiers for. If they want to do individual meters and individual meters to individual users in a commercial complex, that was fine. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to basically work within their current on-site infrastructure and just work with us and work around our system. And this is an attempt to try and say, no, it's not fair, and that's not what we're trying to attempt here. So, yeah, for commercial one in, I would encourage them to do submetering of separate suites so that they can, in the future, they can always attribute it back to individual suites or even residential to buildings so that you can have that accountability and say, your neighbors are using more water or less water than you. What are you doing differently? So. Okay. So again, that was section 1, the definition section. Section 2, we're just cleaning up some text amendments in 52-108 for the extensions, trying to clarify what extensions would be, especially if there's different owners involved. Let me see here. That's really entire section 2 is regarding to that.
Sean, on D, fire hydrants would be required too on any extensions, wouldn't they?
Typically, per the building code, the International Fire Code, what happens on extension is that they currently, when they come in to build, the fire marshal will actually determine whether or not they're within 600 feet of the building or the property line, and they'll ask them to install a fire hydrant. So we have that going on throughout. So we're actually doing a bit of an infill program by that, but that's based on the International Fire Code. We don't require it automatically. What's required by Maricopa Association of Governments is to do a blow-off so that we can actually not have an unmetered service at the end of the line, that we can flush the line out. A hydrant's a little bit of a fancier blow-off, but it also provides other services to the town. So I'm not sure if there's anything else to talk about in Section 2. Section 3 is going back to the buildings having separate service connections. That's just trying to do some cleanup language that we had in there. And we're adding the Section C. Except as provided for in Section 52-202A and B, single-family residential residences should be limited to 1 water meter per parcel. 2 or more meters in a manifold configuration are prohibited. Again, that's the intent to try and, for residential, we don't want someone trying to divide their load out between multiple meters if they have a larger load. So that's just carrying that definition through. Section 4, you can see, is a lot of revisions. And that's where the old water policy kept a lot of that in the policy statement itself. We're thinking it's better to put it into the town code, and then the policy directs you to town code. And that takes into account whether it's development, any existing or any future development that might occur in Desert Hills that does have a contractual obligation. Instead of having it in a policy, so we'll just follow town code. It's either you're inside or outside town. But again, if there's no contractual obligation or statutory obligation, we won't provide that service outside town municipal limits. So what we did here is we broke up section, what was a simplified section D, we broke it into D, E, and F, and G actually going all the way to H. So we've tried to break it into the different types, and this is where some of the challenges have come in. Smaller meter connections, multifamily connections, and larger meters, larger water consumption. The old section just really basically said if someone needed a 1-inch or larger meter, then they had to provide a water document and potentially come to council and get a development agreement in gist. This is actually adding a lot more meat to this and trying to get us back to different ideas of how we can implement this. And what we're trying to get down to is the volumetric limits. And it really still comes down to if someone wants to bring a subdivision forward, and town code defines a subdivision as when you have common ownership and it divides the property, three partial splits that creates the fourth lot. That's our definition of a subdivision. They have to bring us new water resources. So that's not changing. We're just defining on the smaller and, say, multifamily what we can do. One of the challenges we found out with multifamily is actually we were kind of limited with the old policy of just giving 1 meter per parcel. Was that we had a multifamily unit that wanted a few smaller meters, which could be to the town's benefit because then we could actually sub-meter individual units and actually also get sewer accounts in each individual unit. We actually had to bring them together saying you could only get the 1 meter for so many properties that were falling on that parcel or so many buildings. So this gives us some latitude as long as they can say that they're going to, realistically say that they're not going to use a large volume of our water, a third of an acre foot for those total properties, which are multifamily. Interior water use is very low, and they usually have common landscaping, so they usually have less water usage than single-family residential. We can have staff can give more latitude and do multiple meters to those properties, and then on the end, we can also do things like sewer accounts, et cetera, for individual buildings on a multifamily unit. Section 24404, the activation of water services. Oh, sorry.
In paragraph F, this bracketed language, we proposed this at this is our first reading, so we can make the change. I went back and looked at the minutes, and there was nothing clear as to whether or not you agreed with this concept. The concept was we now have a property owner, a developer, who doesn't want to bring 100 years of water, but would bring the development, and then there could be a development agreement that would have to be recorded against the property, and then he or she could bring less water. That's bracketed. That was since then. We've now added in the last part to capture the concept that Sean mentioned about entering into a development agreement. You, the council, can waive the requirement to bring external water if you meet certain conditions, and it will not unfairly and adversely impact existing customers and provide the town with a benefit. You probably don't need the bracketed language in light of the broad power to waive later, but we will need guidance as to whether or not we should delete the bracketed language.
Why would you even have the bracketed language? I don't understand why you'd even need it.
Well, it was there before and you didn't tell us to take it out, so I'm asking if you want us to take it out.
I don't want it.
Because what we didn't have, the other language wasn't there before.
Okay.
And so I think the other language fits it more generically and gives you more flexibility. But it was in there, it was bracketed, you didn't say leave it in or take it out, so we're asking you now.
I just didn't take it out. I think the other one's great. The last part of that is what we're looking for.
I agree. It should be taken out because it's so indefinite. Because you don't know exactly what the length of time would be. Plus, how do you measure that? Yeah.
And I'm not going to say anything because two people have made a suggestion and we didn't make a decision. We just changed that. It's a non-action item.
There's a consensus of two people.
Yeah. You got a consensus of two, as the vice mayor said.
Well, then I think we're hearing take it out. Does anybody disagree with that?
No.
So again, getting back again on page 5 was 52404's activation of water service. That's just clarifying again. It still says that we provide will serves. That's a way for us to track that there is a policy in that, but it clarifies at the end that a will serve is not a contractual obligation. That's going back to our discussions, especially in Desert Hills. It's a will serve is our ability to give some not certainty at a certain point in time that yes, we will serve you if you can do a line extension or if there's water resources available, but it's not an indefinite contract, and we're trying to clarify that. So. it's just more of a tracking tool for us, and it's something that actually our understanding is property owners do need that as they go through the development process. Sometimes outside agencies will ask for those things like getting even securing financing. They sometimes want a will serve, but we're trying to say we don't have a designation assured water supply. We'll give you a will serve for a distinct amount of time. Again, based on the current criteria as today is when we're issuing it to you. So then we go to, we're still in section 52.404. We talked about section C, subdivisions. Again, we're clarifying the language in there. The fact that subdivision is supposed to bring us new water resources, so they're not taking away from the town's existing water resource allocation. And that's referring back to the Arizona Revised Statute sections of a subdivision having 100 years secured water supply. Let's see. And then we do 52.405, subsection C. Again, further clarifying subdivisions again. I don't see any significant changes there. Again, it's just, I think, reiterating in that subsection. Again, what we did is we went through the entire chapter 52 to verify and to try and clean up the language. We did add 52.411, discontinuance of service on order of customer. Section E is a new one. So the intent there is that the town has a legacy of water meters. Actually, I think it's with talking with staff, it's over 100 in the ground right now, where the prior water company had authorized service for someone and they put a water meter in. So now we get customers coming back and saying, well, I'd like to reactivate that account. What we do as staff, we'll go and verify. We have some older records, we can verify it. But town code actually says that if to be considered an active account, it has to be paying the monthly base fee. So we've gone back to a few property owners saying, well, you can either set it up and pay the base fees back through, I think it's March 2007 when we bought the service, and I've got a spreadsheet that shows you how much that is, and it's not cheap. Or you can pay it, you can ask for a new water service, and we set it up as a new water service. And with our current capacity fees that we charge on water meters, it's actually cheaper if someone deactivated the service prior to us buying the water company. They actually set it up as a brand new service. This gives us staff a latitude to actually reach out to the property owners and say, we're aware there's a meter. I believe there's 98 is what the count has with staff right now. We'll give them notice, but it allows us physically to remove the meter. So there's some confusion when there's a meter in a box. They think there's an implied service, and we're saying, no, we'll pull it out. You can come apply for a new service, but that meter is not yours. It's actually the town's meter because we bought the water system, and the meters were actually part of the purchase that we did. And it just cleans that up, and it'll help us clean up some of our old account legacies that we have in the field. So that's a good thing for our staff, I think. So I've covered a lot, and I know there's some big things to take in, but this is supposed to be a two-way conversation, so we can hear back from council. Obviously, preserving the town's water resources is our main priority with the changes we're presenting. And the biggest one is, again, knowing that we're committed to providing services to our existing customers in Desert Hills, but limiting new connections so we can preserve the water resources for both water companies that we do have. And with that, I can answer any questions. Take any questions.
Council? Councilman McGuire?
We've had increased usage of water and drawing water to Desert Hills. Is that a function of increasing customers out there, or do we see that the customers there are using more water? In other words, if we're not taking on more customers, does that mean that we will actively bring the increasing water service under control?
I've looked at those numbers. So we've had some growth out in Desert Hills. It's actually not as much as I thought when I actually looked at the numbers over a number of years. I don't have them in front of me. And I've actually also looked at the usage per account out in Desert Hills, and it hasn't been that significant. The biggest change in Desert Hills has been the reduction in groundwater production. Since I've been on board in 2.5 years, the two of the three wells have had issues. Actually, we have issues with all three. So the largest well, the Joy Ranch well, that was derated a few years ago, and we actually had a larger pump, and we were throttling it down. So when the well went out about 20 months ago, we actually put in a smaller pump to better meet what the pump drawdown calculations had shown. The Galvin well, which we're wrapping up the repairs on that when that burnt out because the water table went down and actually burnt the motor up. So we're finishing off the repairs on that, but we did a wall well drawdown test on that. And again, we had to derate that pump. It had a 160 gallon a minute pump in the hole. We actually had to put in an 80 gallon a minute pump because the amount of, we were overdrawing the aquifer. And then the last well is what's referred to as our 10th Street well, which is at the 10th Street site. So we run that during the summertime, and every 2 to 3 days we have to rest that well to allow the groundwater to recover. It's an interesting well because I pulled up the video log, and it's an 800-foot deep well, but the bottom 150 feet is directly bored into granite. So there is no well casing.
Pardon?
It's bored into the granite, so there is no well casing. The well casing stops 180 feet above the well bottom, so they're just using fractured granite at the bottom. So of our 3 wells, it's actually the most shallow. And we've seen that just with our drawdown in the water. When we use it in the summertime, we're actually having to rest it every second day, otherwise we'll burn that motor out also.
Are we close to a sustainable yield for those wells? In other words, I know that we've had to decrease the water we're taking out. Are we at a point that we can continue the water we're taking out now?
I believe we are. Our staff have been doing drawdown measurements, or they measure it with the Galvin well being out. We're actually putting another sounding tube in, so we're actually going to put a pressure transducer down to it so we can use our SCADA system to actually monitor the groundwater level in that well. But the tests that the staff have done, and typically once a month they'll go out and measure the water table at the well itself. It's been more stable than it has been around our wells. I can't say that in general for the aquifer in the area, but around our wells, we have not been overdrawing it, and it's been more stable in the last 18 months.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else from council? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, next steps will be we'll make that quick revision to the text, and we'll be coming back to council with an actual resolution to adapt it as a public document and an adoption of the ordinance to make the code changes. The first hearing in December, and second hearing hopefully the end of December, and then the adoption of the water policy itself. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I apologize very much. When I came into the chambers, I was distracted, and you may be looking in the audience saying, who's the strange man back here? I'd like to introduce Kent Brooksby, who we have contracted through Interim Public Management as our interim finance director. And Mr. Brooksby should be with us for a few months at least. He comes to us from multiple locations that he has filled in as interim finance director in the Valley, from Avondale to Apache Junction to Paradise Valley. He spent 15 years in Pine Top Lakeside, I believe. So he's got years of experience, and we were in need of someone to sit in that seat. So he'll be here for a few months anyway.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I was wondering who the second necktie was in the room.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry, Kat. I just didn't see it. So, okay, so.
This is, like the old, what was a steakhouse with all the ties hanging from the ceiling. Anyway, agenda action items, consent agenda, approval of the November 1st, 2021 regular council meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes clearly have it. General agenda item number 1, a resolution of the mayor and town council.
Recording in progress.
Oops.
Hopefully that didn't just start.
So are we or aren't we?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm remiss too. I didn't. To my left is Michelle Van Queethen. So I introduced her last meeting. I want to make sure I introduce her again. She's been really helping myself and Bill to draft the water policy. And actually, Michelle's been helping me work through the all the details involved with getting the permits in place for our recharge. So, been a great addition to our team.
Thank you, Michelle.
So again, we get 3 actions for you tonight, and it's going back to storage agreements with the Central Arizona project. So next slide, Brian. Oh, you missed one. Went back. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. So the town has 2 allocations with the Central Arizona Water Project. We have the existing municipal and industrial water supply, which is more secure. I didn't put the chart up there that shows the security of the allocations. That's 2606. There is an amendment being done to take as part of the settlement agreement with Carefree. That is 378 acre feet. So I'm just going to push that aside. That is coming. But again, we were sending over 300 acre feet of that just to support those customers. So it's almost it's not quite a wash, but it's getting close to that. And then we also have the 386 acre feet of non-Indian agricultural water that we've been working on. Michelle has been helping us work through that process. So that's going through the final of judicial validation process, which will allow that subcontract to be placed. So we're assuming we have both allocations moving forward. And the next step that we want to do is we want to look at the fact that in the past, we have not used all of even our existing municipal and industrial allocation. I pulled up the last fiscal year, and we had only used just over 2,100 acre feet of the allocation. So that left water in the canal, if you want to think of it that way. One of the ways that the CAP canal works is that you actually pay for the capital charges on all your water allocation, but you only pay for the delivery and pumping costs, which are the more substantial costs for the water that you use. But we're still allowing some water to flow down the canal past us. We're not getting a beneficial use out of it. So the intent here is to try and get something in place. It's not the ultimate solution, but it's a good solution. It's another tool in our toolbox for managing the town's overall water resources. Next slide, Brian. Again, when we look out currently and in the foreseeable future, and we'll update this with our next master plan, it's pretty clear that we're not going to be utilizing all of either CAP allocation at this point. So there is some water available for us. State law allows us to actually recharge a portion of that water and generate long-term storage credits. So there's a lot of nuances to that, but at this point, we don't have an opportunity to do that. So we wanted to work forward with that. So it's a two-step process. One was obtaining the permits from the Arizona Department of Water Resources. So we have done that. While there's 3 action items before, the math gets a little confusing. There's actually 4 permits that we actually have with ADWR because the Agua Fria facility for the Central Arizona project is considered 2 different permits. And we actually also have permit applications in for the 3 ARS injection wells that we actually have with the IGA in place with City of Phoenix that allows us to utilize them. It's more costly for us to recharge with Phoenix, but it's another option we have. And we're just, we're working through the process with Arizona Department of Water Resources to have those permits put in place. But the last step with Central Arizona project is actually getting these service agreements that's before you tonight. So you see the draft. Michelle has been looking at the agreements, had a couple of corrections with the CAP staff. I saw some of those corrections coming back. So you see the drafts, it's just more grammatical actually, but we're asking for permission that the mayor and city town attorney and town manager can actually authorize these moving forward. And with that, Brian, next one. So why is this important to us? You know, the CAP is a good partner for us to have because it actually operates several recharge facilities along the length of the canal. When we went and talked to them, they said they gave us a consent letter, which consent to store at 3 of those facilities. So the Topanga Desert, Hieroglyphic Mountains, and the Agua Fria. The Agua Fria is unique in that it actually is 2 because the facility itself is about 2 miles south of the Cap Canal. The other 2 are adjacent to the Cap Canal. So they have what's called the managed and the constructed facility. Managed means that it's actually the canal, it's not a full lined canal. So they actually don't get all full credits for that water, but the water gets transmitted down there, goes through the managed facility to the constructed basins. Real quick, I think some pictures are worth 1,000 words in talking here. Brian, next slide. So this is the Topanga Desert facility. Tonopah. What did I say? Topanga? I don't know. I got it in my head.
Former life.
Yeah.
Right, former life.
So this is the largest of the 3 facilities we have access to. You can see the large spreading basins. This is located very much on the west side of the Maricopa Basin, just north of I-10. Next facility. Next slide, Brian. The Hieroglyphic Mountains recharge facility is located north of the Cap Canal, about 163rd Avenue alignment. And then next one, Brian. And then the Agua Fria recharge facility. And I was laughing with Michelle when I pulled this off the website because actually I live next to this facility, but my house isn't there, and I've been living there for 7 years. So it's a slightly older picture. So there's been some development. And what's unique about this one, if I can find a good graphic, is again, is the canal you see exiting the left side of the slide is actually the portion of the 2 miles of the transfer down the Agua Fria River to this facility. So that's considered the managed facility, and you're looking at what they call the constructed facility. So these are large spreading basins. Brian, next slide. Which are one of the options for doing recharge. So the goal of recharge is to put water back into the aquifer so that you can then prevent groundwater mining And then you can actually bring the water table back up, and then you can withdraw that at a future date. So, and like, it's not considered groundwater at that point. It's being legally transferred to a renewable water supply. So you're actually recovering water, you're not mining groundwater at that point. So this is a slide shows you 4 different options. On the left side is a Veda zone well. It's almost like a stormwater well. They're not as deep. They don't go directly into the aquifer, and they allow the water to come down and then to recharge using through the soil interface back into the aquifer. The recharge basins is the next option. That's the facilities that the CAP operates. They're large basins that they percolate. While they look, in some cases, almost look like a pond, they're actually always flowing down, and they're interesting to manage because you have to make sure that you do get that breakthrough and the water is going down through them. So it's had the opportunity to work with that in Avondale, and there can be a challenge to operate, but it's kind of interesting when you see that you see standing water, but it's never truly standing. It's actually always flowing. The next one over is more of the managed facility, and the graphic doesn't really do it justice, but that's where, again, like the hour free managed facility, where you're using something like a wash bottom to allow that water to go in. So it's not as constructed as the large recharge beds. And you get less credits for that. I believe you only get half of the water that goes through a managed facility as you get credits for it. And the last one is the recharge recovery wells, sometimes referred to as an ARS well. So we actually have, per our IGA with City of Phoenix, we actually have access to 3 of their ARS wells, where they actually have wells that go down into the aquifer itself, similar to a production well, and you're actually forcing the water back into the aquifer that way, and you can also draw it back up. Next slide, Brian. So moving forward, as I mentioned, we've obtained Arizona Department of Water Resources has given us the permits for the use of the CAP facility. So now we actually have our long-term storage credit bank account in place with those permits. We actually have the 3 pending permits with the Phoenix ARS wells that they, per our IGA, they gave us access to. So the last step for us to work with the CAP, or to give staff the ability to work with CAP, is to put these agreements in place. So without these agreements, we can't place the orders and allow them to recharge, even though the state can give us the credits, the CAP's processes, they want these agreements in place. They don't obligate us to a certain volume, but it's just they're part of their process. So their board has to authorize it once council authorizes these to their board, and they're trying to get them on their December board meeting, which gives us access to do our recharging next year with some of our CAP allocation. With that, I can answer any questions.
Mayor, you're there. Gotta speak up.
And I made a mistake.
Sean, what, in addition to the cost of the cap water, what would be the approximate cost to put the water in the recharge project? And then would there be a cost to store it there? That's the second part of the question. And the third and last part, my question is there a cost then to pull it out, to use it at some future date? I didn't see any approximate cost or fees involved.
Yeah, Mayor, council member, I tried to put that in some of the financials, but just to help explain. So right now, and again, the CAP does they adopt a schedule for the next year. They give you, which is a firm schedule, and they look out at 5-year projections to give you ideas. But the current projection rate is the capital cost on all the water is $50 per acre foot, and the delivery cost is $192 per acre foot for asking that water to be delivered. So if we're going to recharge it, it's considered delivered water. So the cost of recharging on top of that right now is $28 per acre foot that we'll be adding, and that would be the cost of the one-time cost for putting that water into that facility with the CAP, on top of the $242 we'll pay per acre foot to actually purchase and pay for the capital costs on that water. So that gives you sort of a magnitude, and then obviously we're generating at that point long-term storage credits. The taking it out, and maybe I'll let Michelle answer this because I get confused on this myself, is it is tricky because it depends on where you put it in. That's why we might want to try and see if we can get in the hour free facility, which is closer to us, and then the Tonopah facility, I'll get that right, which is way on the western side, which is actually in a different drainage basin than us. But there's multiple ways out. If we had our recharge, if we had wells within an area to influence, we can actually have those wells permitted as recovery wells. So we, again, instead of mining groundwater, we're actually recovering water. That's the legal terms. Michelle.
It gets very complicated very fast when we talk about recovery. But the strategy here is one followed by most people that have CAP water resources, which it's fairly low cost. but time consuming to set yourself up to be able to store. And so that's the process we're doing right now. So the town with really no expenditure will be ready based on, the small amount of fees that you paid for the getting the permits to do the storage. And after that, it's pretty complicated about whether we will be able to successfully store. Not to get in the weeds, but there are currently some rules in place that the town would have to look at every year to see whether they are mining groundwater. And if they are, they may not get credit. So they'll have to make maybe a spur of the moment decision on whether to store or not. So this gives maximum flexibility to do if you can. On a moment's notice, throw some water into storage. Recovery is a different question because those facilities have been storing for years and there's really no recovery set up for those. Maybe Peoria probably has some because it's near the Agua Fria. The Tonopah Desert has no recovery facilities nearby. Currently, under current law, you can recover in a different location under very complicated circumstances, not every circumstance. But that may change over time so that you do need to actually put your well right next to the storage facility. And at that point, then whoever wants to get the water out is going to probably have to figure out a way to do it and fund it. And it may be a group project at Tonopah because there are a number of governments that store there. They'll have to get electricity to the site. They'll have to put in a well. They may need to treat the water. They'll have to figure out how to put it back through the CAP canal. So it's all of those details are being worked out by CAP, but they haven't actually put the wells in yet. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
I want to point out first that the 900 acre feet that you say is available probably isn't because we're losing 378 acre feet to Carefree over the next couple of years. And they don't use anywhere near that amount of water because their utilization is no higher than Cave Creek residents are. So it's going to be a little less, 100 and some odd. I just wanted to mention that. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name. I'm not very good at names. I would have forgotten it within a second. Oh, okay. I forgot. I'm sorry. There is no way to recover the water at the present time, right?
well, there is a way to recover the water remotely. All of the cities, except for Cave Creek, but Cave Creek will probably join them, have recovery well permits. And they can recover water stored in Tonopah elsewhere in the basin under certain circumstances. That gets very complicated. So there is a way to recover that remotely. They're basically exchanging the water locally for other water. But in the future, I think people are going to have to start taking water closer to the facilities. And so there will be a need for more wells in places that don't have wells, like Tonopah. Agua Fria has wells around it already. So,
well, it would seem to me we're downstream from all of these areas.
Right.
The obvious thing to do for recovery would be for them to dump it into the canal, and then we pull it out of the canal.
The reason for our selection of those three facilities, right? That was precisely the point, was to get.
I was trying to,
right.
The simplest solution is usually the best.
And if you get it up on the stream, if you go farther upstream, if there's a potential to exchange with another party where you might pay SRP to pump its wells instead of taking its CAP water, and you could actually do an exchange where you're not actually recovering water, but that gets very complicated. But
now you have made it complicated.
it just gives a lot more flexibility,
Right.
and it's a very low cost because the costs have already been incurred, which was the
That's good.
application
Thank you.
fees. So
Councilman Morris.
I just did a quick calculation. It's amazingly cheap to put it in the ground.
Yeah.
I just figured 200 acre feet, if we have 200 acre feet extra water, it's less than $50,000 to put it in the ground. And that's a significant amount of water, especially over time. If some of the cities, do they have a scenario for what would have to happen for them to take the water back out again? I mean, is this for emergencies where the canal goes down upstream, or Is it for long-term use, or what's the thinking behind when this water would be needed and used?
Well, some cities, especially the people who have designations of assured water supplies, already recover on an annual basis what they store. That's how they stay in balance with their groundwater use. And it's very
Yeah,
complicated.
I didn't understand what you said, but.
The town does not have a designation of assured water supply, so the town is considered to be mining when it uses groundwater. And so it's not in balance, it's mining groundwater. There are other cities that have designations such as Phoenix,
They have to hold the
Goodyear.
water table the same.
They
level.
have to equal.
Yeah.
Yeah, they hold the water tables the same every year. So they will be storing and recovering in the same year to make sure that they have as much going in as coming out. So they do actively recover some of the storage, but they also, in many cases, are storing for the future and don't touch that.
The ones that store for the future, because we'd be more in that category. We're not going, it's not just a way to move gallons of water around, it's to actually store it for something. What a scenario that might happen sometime in the future, a cutback or maintenance problems or whatever. Have you heard of any other towns that have defined what sorts of scenarios would cause them to bring the water back out?
I will give you an example. The town of Queen Creek is similar to the town of Cave Creek in that it is not a designated provider. And so it doesn't need to be in balance with its groundwater use, but has chosen to actively try to store and recover more so that it can show less groundwater use on the bills of its customers who are CAGRD member lands. And you have some in the town of Cave Creek as well. When the town in that case can show that those customers are using less groundwater, then those customers on their tax bill pay less for replenishment services. So there is a benefit to the town residents if you're recovering the water and using it on an annual basis. You don't currently have any recovery well permits, and your aquifer is not very helpful. So I don't see that as a great strategy here, but storing for the future is a great strategy.
Well, yeah, but you have to use it. If it just sits there, I mean, at some point you're storing against some kind of event. So something bad happening. It obviously won't last forever. It's not a stream. It's just a kind of a big tank down there. Okay, so maybe there's not an answer to the question right now.
I have a question.
Councilmember Roy.
Well, one of the alternatives to storage is getting credits. Isn't that one of the primary benefits of doing this right now? Because we don't need our excess water. We've been letting it go down the canal for many, many years and paying capital charges on it. So with these permits and these IGAs, we'll be able to get credit. Can you explain that process?
There's currently a definition in the statutes that I will munch because I'm going to make it more understandable because it's virtually impossible to read. It's the longest sentence in the statute, I think. But we call it water bud in the water world. And what it basically says is that if a provider is mining groundwater so that you're basically not replenishing all the water that you take out of the ground every year, not putting it back, then you can't earn long-term storage credits. And there are quite a few stakeholders this year that are going to try to change that in the legislature so that entities that are paying for their CAP water can earn storage credits with it, even though they're forced to mine, because the general belief is that people are using their CAP water. And that was the original reason for limiting storage credit options. And people are using CAP water now. So there's just no reason not to allow you to have the full benefit of the allocation. So we may need your help in the legislature on that issue.
Good.
Councilmember McGuire.
I will say I am very concerned when I look at inflow to Lake Powell, which is really ultimately our water supply, the expansion of the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, and the expanded use of that. Does that concern you as much as it concerns me? And global warming has to be put in there too.
Yes, and it has concerned water people for so many years that I think we were all almost relieved when there was a shortage finally, because we think it's going to be every year.
Yeah.
No, of course it's concerning, and they're doing their best to address it at the state level with negotiations with the other states.
Because at some point that could dig into M&I water, which is would dig into the water that we're using.
Which is precisely the reason that we're doing some forward planning on storage and whatever we can do to find new water sources, including the new policy. And
Hey,
Councilman, so
question, could the town ever sell its stored water or a portion of it, or credits if that were applicable at a future date, or is that prohibited and it's just strictly for the benefit and use of the town that's taking part of that recharge facility?
traditionally, once water has been stored, the powers that be do not assert any claim over it anymore. And yes, the town could sell those credits. However, the town would be able to earn those credits only if we get over this hurdle with the mining definition. So if the town is using, all of its CUP water for town services and only withdrawing a little groundwater, and it puts that much back in the ground for no credit, and then it has more to put in the ground, it can earn credits for the amount that was a benefit to the aquifer that year under current law. And yes, those credits should be sellable afterwards. Very few providers would ever do that. I think there was one sell I've heard of and nobody showed up. So
Thank you.
there is public comment on this.
Yes, Eileen Wright.
Good evening, Eileen Wright, Cave Creek resident. Water sustainability planning is one of the most important things we have and is critical to everything that happens in our town. When I was on the council, I brought forward an agenda item just to take care of part of that. That agenda item said, develop and implement a recharge project permitted by the Arizona Department of Water Resources. That agenda item was approved and it went to staff and it never came out again. So I don't know if this is part of the result of that or what this is. But what we are looking at tonight, there is not enough water to go through with what you're planning with this recharge. Our cap water, we all know our allocation is 2606. Our NIA water is 386. That add those two together, you have 2,992 acre feet of water that will be available. But we know the NIA water is very questionable and not reliable because it's actually what they call a secondary priority by CAP. So that isn't water that you're necessarily going to have available if you want it. But we have this number 2,992. Now, if we look at some of the paperwork that we've gotten from our utility director, he has led us to the number 2,124, which is the amount of water that was used in 2020-21. If you take that number and subtract it from the available water, you get the 868 acre feet of water, which I assume is the amount of water he was referencing when he was saying that that would be the water that you could recharge or that you could bank. But that's a flawed number because for number one, the loss of the water that we had for Carefree is 377.8 acre feet of water. That must be subtracted from this number. It no longer exists. Also, we can't rely on the NIA water, the 386 plus acre feet of water. That also must be removed because we can't count on that. So if you take the 868 acre feet of water, subtract those two flaws that I just referenced, which is 763 acre feet of water, you now have 137 acre feet of water that can be recharged or banked. On top of that, we now have 24.32 acre feet of water that is being committed to hidden canyons. Again, that would be subtracted from this amount of water. So you end up with 112 acre feet of water that you would be able to recharge or bank. Those are accurate numbers. It seems to me that maybe we should take a minute and relook at what we're doing before we step forward and make sure this is a long-term solution that would be best for the town. Thank you.
No other speakers.
We're back to council. Got to turn my microphone on. We're back to council for a motion, and I'm assuming that Council Member Royer would like to make that.
I would
motion.
love to make it, although I guess I have a question before we do this. And do we want to respond to any of Ms. Wright's comments with the facts?
I don't know that I have a good handle on the numbers she laid out, and certainly I know that I don't have a good handle on them. But I would just say, even if there's only 100 acre feet available for storage, this is a very low cost way to make sure that that's captured and that the NIA water is captured when we're ready, and without it, you won't have that ability. You'll let it go flowing on by. So I don't think there's any reason not to move forward to get the permits in place. You could make the decision whether to do it on a yearly basis later, but.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember, so we could bank the NIA as long as it's available.
Right. That's really the good use of NIA water, because it's not reliable enough to bank on every
That's the
year.
best use for it, actually.
Best use is storage.
Yeah. All right. Back to you, Council.
Did you have a comment? Oh,
Well, just one thing on the math, the carefree water, there's only 80 net we're losing because it's, we're not going to be supplying the 300 acre feet, and we won't be getting the 300 acre feet. So that's a wash. It's only the uplift from what they're actually using. Is that correct, Sean?
Yeah, so per the settlement agreement, the transfer of 378 acre feet was defined in the IGA that was entered into. Just last fiscal year, the carefree customers used 303 acre feet of water. So there a little bit of gap is difference for the development that was being proposed. So when you look at the math, we do drop, but we're also losing over 300 acre feet of demand on our system once the conversion is done, but we're losing 78 acre feet per the settlement agreement.
So we're in somewhere around 400 acre feet without NIA water.
Correct. That's my math.
and then one last comment I'd like to make, per Ms. Wright's comments. There is a difference between whatever you considered when you were on the council. I think the language was to start a recharge project or something to that effect. And we did not have to do that. We did not have to use a consultant. We didn't have to spend a penny to put this agreement in place in terms of an engineer to design a brand new recharge project for Cape Creek. We are working collaboratively with Central Arizona Project, an expert in recharge management and water resource management. And we worked, government entity to government entity, and it didn't cost us a dime. And that's what I think is really important to our residents. We're using Michelle's expertise, but beyond that, we did not have to hire any kind of an outside consultant to design and build another recharge project because these already exist. And in fact, I was working at CAP when all these 3 recharge projects were dedicated to the public, and every municipality who was there is so proud to be a part of it because everybody knows how important it is to store every single drop of excess water. So yes, I would be thrilled to read
I
this.
thought you might.
Thank you so much. Motion to approve Resolution R 2021-20. A resolution of the mayor and council of the town of Cape Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, authorizing the mayor to approve an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Cape Creek and the Central Arizona Water Conservation District for the storage of water at the Agua Fria Recharge Project.
Second.
Since this doesn't cost us anything, I think we can just do a voice vote, right, Mr. Sims? All those, or anybody want to make comments at this point? Oh, I see the vice mayor put his microphone on.
I put my, microphone on, so actually I'm going to say that this is one of those things where back in the olden days, we used to say is the squirt worth the squeeze. And there's not much squirt here, and it's going to cost us money. We have to pay for the water, right?
We have to pay the capital charges regardless, which is about $50 per acre foot right now. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And then we have to pay for transport and everything else. I will vote in favor of this, but it's reluctantly.
I'm going to chime in here and say I read a report earlier this year, probably in April or May, that was talking about the fact that the upper basin needed 13 inches of moisture, snow equivalent actually, to get the soil moisture levels back to where they belong in order to get the runoff into the Lake Powell, and then obviously back down to Meade through that and through the chain. Having that kind of a deficit, I think it would behoove us to store as much as we can possibly get our hands on at this point in time that we've got a right to, including the NIA, which is as long as it's available, we should be sticking that in the ground. Councilman McGuire, I see you got a couple of fingers sticking up there.
I do, more than one, fortunately. And I want to echo what you have said. I also want to make a suggestion that our citizens read the report that came out from the Morrison Institute Kyle Center called The Myth of Safe Yield. And it really puts on the line, I think, a truly honest way of looking into the future. And in fact, I found it more useful than reports from other agencies. So the name of the report is The Myth of Safe Yield, and it comes from the Kyle Center Morrison Institute. It's not a pretty picture.
Can I make one last comment?
Yeah.
I do want to acknowledge everybody who has been involved in the effort to recharge and bank water. I know that previous councils and the Water Advisory Committee, both past and present, have had this on their agenda. And it's finally coming to fruition. And I couldn't be happier. I've said that many times. But I do know that it's a team effort, and we've been working on this for a long time. And I just want to acknowledge everybody who has been involved and who has realized how important it is to save and protect our water. So.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Agenda item number 2, resolution of the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, authorizing the mayor to approve an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Cave Creek and Central Arizona Water Conservation District for the storage of water at the Hieroglyphic Mountains Recharge Project. You want to present all over again?
Do you want me to?
No, he doesn't.
There's public comment on this one.
No public comment.
We have none. Back to council
Want to take a vote?
for a motion.
I'll make the motion. Motion to approve resolution R 2021-21, a resolution
There's
of
22.
No, 21.
Oh, am I on the wrong one?
We're in number item 2.
Sorry.
a resolution of the mayor and council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, authorizing the mayor to approve an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Cave Creek and the Central Arizona Water Conservation District for the storage of water at the Hieroglyphic Mountains Recharge Project.
Second.
You got a couple of comments on this one, folks? All right, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes clearly have it. Agenda item number 3, resolution, the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, authorizing the mayor to approve an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Cave Creek and Central Arizona Water Conservation District for the storage of water at the Tonopah Desert Recharge Project. Sean, you want to present?
I'm fine, sir.
You're fine. Okay, no comment. All right. We're a public comment.
No public comment.
We have none. We're back to council. Anybody want to shoot this one?
I'll make the motion to approve resolution R 2021-22, A resolution of the mayor and council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, authorizing the mayor to approve an intergovernmental agreement between the town of Cave Creek and the Central Arizona Water Conservation District for the storage of water at the Tonopah Desert Recharge Project.
Second.
No comments?
One comment.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm thrilled.
I just
What a
wanted to
surprise.
thank three last people, well, maybe four, the four who are at these tables. Carrie did an outstanding job pulling this together. Sean, we couldn't have done it without you. Michelle, thank you so much for your expertise. And Bill Sims, if you were involved in this at all. No, well, nevertheless,
Thank you. anyway.
nevertheless, a huge thank you on behalf of this town council for getting this done.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes clear have it. Motion carries 7-0. Until next time, next Monday, when we have the presentation on the finances for fire, ask for an adjournment, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're closed.
Sean?